Hello, everyone. It is Sabrina Fox, founder of Fox Legal Training. I have taken a little hiatus from making videos on covenants, but I am back and not a moment too soon because things are getting very interesting. I saw TalkTalk's announcement on Monday about the restructuring that was agreed and the lockup levels and the launch of the consent and all of these other interesting fun things. And I wanted to share a very short presentation about some of the issues that I think the situation raises and how I think we could potentially extrapolate this to other situations, because ultimately we always want to be learning as we go, and this situation offers us some really excellent learning points that I wanted to share with you. Starting with the general tightness of the covenant package. So here I have on the page covenant considerations for stressed borrowers. This is what they're thinking about when they need to figure out what to do about their balance sheet because they are having difficulty paying their obligations when they come due, or they think that that might be the case at some future time. So what are they going to be looking first? They're going to be looking at their covenant flexibility. Do they have any options under the covenant package to do something in sort of a liability management exercise format where they don't have to go to their lenders to get any consents? That is the easiest, swiftest, cheapest way for most companies to address their balance sheet issues. And for many, many borrowers, as we are all very well aware, this is usually possible because they've got pretty flexible covenant packages. I won't go into why and the implications of all that, but suffice it to say, this is the first port of call. Second, they will be looking at the possibility of a consensual restructuring, which is what TalkTalk is doing now. I'm going to talk in just one second about why they didn't go with option one, or why I believe they didn't go with option one. But the consensual restructuring process will mean that they come to their lenders and under the voting thresholds of their debt, they consider what they can achieve in making amendments or exchanges, consent solicitations, etc. And that is what we are seeing play out with TalkTalk now. Finally, if the consensual route is not possible, they will be looking at the different options they have for restructuring regimes, a formal insolvency or restructuring process, and depending on where in the jurisdiction they're in, they will have different options available to them. So UK has different options compared to Germany, compared to France, etc., etc. And there was an article several months ago which discussed how at the management presentation, TalkTalk said that they wanted to move forward with a consensual restructuring because it was smoother and cheaper, but that they would go to the restructuring regime if they had to. The story so far, I think some very important points are that they had lender and shareholder lockup achieved. They were downgraded to CCC upon announcement, which is completely makes sense based on how the ratings agencies assess these things. S&P downgraded them to D because of the nature of their restructuring, also makes sense. And the restructuring is currently in process with the consent launched on Monday. Now, the thing that I think makes this such an interesting case study is that back in October 2023, management expected to pay back their debt at par. We are not even a year from that statement or that perception of management about the likelihood that they could do that, and we're in a restructuring situation. So for lenders, this is something you really want to think about if you're looking at your portfolio and you do want to avoid the situation that TalkTalk lenders are in now. Really think about, well, does the company have the ability? Do they have the runway? Do they have the operational, flexibility? Do they have the potential upside and EBITDA? Do they have a plan? Is this possible? Unfortunately for TalkTalk, it turned out not to be. So there was some cash burn. There was a looming RCF covenant breach. This was all discussed in the media, including DebtWire. They engaged with new equity investors since February. So the early engagement of equity investors and the shareholders, I think, is a key point here as well. Bondholders appointed counsel and advisors. Again, early lender action is super important because it puts you much more in the driver's seat than you would be otherwise. And then the lockup was achieved at 70% and then 97% just this month. So, what do we think are the key issues? Now, the early stakeholder support was very important in this situation. The shareholders indicated a willingness to inject capital to support the business, and lenders organized early. I also believe that the tight covenant package that TalkTalk has relative to peers is also a really key point in this situation, because they did not have significant flexibility to maneuver via an LME. Now, whether this put lenders in a better or worse situation is really something we could kind of pontificate about, but the bottom line is there was not sufficient flexibility for this to happen. So some of the restructuring positives, and this is something that frankly all lenders should be looking for in a restructuring scenario. Tighter lender protection. So according to DebtWire, there's a leverage covenant, a liquidity covenant, tighter baskets and thresholds in the new debt. There should be, we want there to be some much stronger guardrails, some much stronger protections than were originally present. This is not a kick the can down the road. The borrower and lenders really want this to be the ultimate solution. They want to be able to get to the end of this, wherever those maturities are. So sometime next year, end of next year, beginning of the year after, they want to be able to refinance this package. They do not want to have to do another restructuring. So yeah, there should be tighter lender protections, absolutely. And there's better collateral. So we've got a contribution to the Virtual One business and the OVO and Shell branded customer bases. Now, this goes back to a point that we make in the course, the Leverage Finance Covenant training, which is available on Fox Legal Training with just a few clicks. You could be learning right after this video. We say in one of our videos that in the capital structure and credit support module, if the borrower is giving you only soft security, maybe ask why. And rest assured that in the future, if the borrower needs to use the assets that they're not giving you for something else, they will. Now, a lot of times what we worry about and what we warn lenders about is that those assets may be used to entice other third-party lenders to come into the structure if the borrower is feeling a bit cash strapped, which means that you are effectively subordinated to the extent of the value of those assets. Now, some of these assets have been purchased since after the deal was done. In the olden days, those would have been added to the collateral in many senior secured deals, but this is obviously not the case anymore. So we've got better collateral now, which again is something that you really want to push for if you're a lender and you're you're involved in a restructuring. You want to make sure that the borrower is giving you assets that back up the promise to pay you back at par. And finally, what do I mean by tighter covenants relative to market? And if you are looking at other deals, these are the types of things you should be looking for. So in the debt covenant, low non-guarantor debt capacity, which means a lesser possibility for the borrower to layer in debt via structural subordination. Low secured debt capacity, particularly secured over assets that do not secure your debt, because that allows the borrower to effectively subordinate you by virtue of the value of those assets. We also want straightforward ratio calculations, which goes a little bit into the other important protections below. If it's straightforward, that means the borrower does not have a lot of wiggle room to make adjustments that will allow those calculations to go in their favor. In the restricted payments covenant, you're going to be looking for lower restricted payments capacity, lower permitted investments capacity, and strong conditions to access the build-up basket. What does that mean, Sabrina? What it means is the build-up basket is going to be over time the most significant source of capacity for most borrowers. As such, the guardrails they put on the ability of the borrower to access that capacity should be strong. No default or event of default must meet the ratio debt test in order to access that capacity. These two protections should be there. They are not present in a lot of deals for all types of restricted payments, which means that there are lots of borrowers out there, like Altice, who can dip into the build-up basket in order to send assets to unrestricted subs, which is outside of the box, and means that they are able to use those assets and leverage for their restructuring discussions with their existing borrowers, which is exactly what Altice is doing now. Some other important protections. These are mostly gone the way of the dodo bird, but payments for consent covenants are really important. It basically means if the borrower pays one lender for consent to make a change to the offering document, they must pay, to the indenture, they must pay other lenders as well. And then the calculation mechanics, which goes a little bit into that debt covenant point on ratio calculations. If the borrower has a super flexible financial calculations covenant, it will mean that they have a lot more flexibility to get the calculation that they want. So with that, I'm going to stop my share and say thank you all for watching. I will keep an eye on this situation, and if there are other situations that you would like me to take a look at, or if you want me to dive a little bit deeper into this one, please don't ever hesitate to get in touch. Sabrina at foxlegaltraining.com, and I look forward to engaging with you on your covenant education journey. Have a great weekend, everybody.